What I think we're living through right now is the reckoning with what has been sort of an emphasis on wounded masculine energy. We haven't had a lot of models of what healthy masculine energy in men, women, however we're talking about gender, but like we all have these energetics within us, but we've sort of been dancing between the distorted or wounded representation of these energetics.
I'm here with my friend Dené Logan, and I was saying to you before we started that I have all these conversations we've had swirling in my body, and I keep thinking we've had this conversation publicly and we haven't. So there might be things I say that have nothing to do with the book because it all merges, but I'm sure you'll take me where we need to go. Uh, but I want to introduce you to my audience because some of them know you, some of them don't, but you're a relationship therapist. You're also a sex therapist, correct?
No, I think because I'm a couples therapist and I obviously talk about what I think is a little bit challenging about the way that we've been holding sex and relationships. A lot of people think that I'm a sex therapist. I'm not a certified sex therapist, but I certainly invite sex into the conversation with couples, maybe more than most couples therapists might. I don't know.
But why I'm having you on is, first of all, your book and just the philosophy itself of sovereign love is
Mm,
what I wanted to dive into with you. We've had so many juicy conversations, as friends, and I thought we should pull these in for people who are listening
mm.
because the book is a great resource. You're going to be doing a retreat at Kripalu, and I have a relationship group coming out in the beginning of October for 6 months. So I figured as people are listening, if they resonate with what I'm saying, with what you're saying, they can go to the episode details and find these links to work with us deeper and to learn your theory more through your book. So that's a long introduction, but welcome. And
Thank you.
anything you want anyone listening to know about you from the get-go around sovereign love and the work that you do?
Mm. Well, I think there's so much about love and relationships that for whatever reason has been uh, I'm obsessed with love. I think love fascinates me. I think the way we love and what feels like love and what doesn't feel like love for whatever reason has always been fascinating to me. And yet I often feel like there's a lot about the way that I move through the world that makes me feel like a lone wolf energy. I sometimes joke that I feel like an alien in the way that I experience things around love and relationships until I met you, Luis. And I feel like there were so many ways when we first met at a retreat that you were hosting in Costa Rica. And I was like, oh, you get it. I just felt so unbelievably seen and
Alien to alien.
yeah, and it was so healing for my little girl and my soul and just really like, yeah, I think that there is a way that we're evolving in our understanding of what it means to relate to one another in a way that I actually find really inspiring, but it's new territory, right? So we're sort of in pioneering energy.
Well, you open your book up with this quote from Maya Angelou that I want to read
Mm,
because it was perfect.
mhm,
If you need permission to go, I liberate you. You see, love liberates. It doesn't bind. Love says, I love you. I love you if you're in China. I love you if you're across town. I love you if you're in Harlem. I love you. I would like to be near you. I'd like to have your arms around me. I'd like to have your voice in my ear. But that's not possible now. So I love you. Go.
mm.
Tell me what that means to you and why that's the beginning of this.
I think the the book starts off with me really talking about what it was for me as a couples therapist to be navigating my own 11 and a half year marriage, changing form. And I always say changing form instead of ending because we have a child together. And so our relationship didn't end and we're still very close friends. But we realized that there was a way that the container of marriage, as it had been in the form previously, was just no longer aligned with who the two of us were becoming, and yet there was so much love between us still. He, is one of my favorite people in the world and one of the safest human beings I've ever known, and I just felt like we don't have a lot of models for what it is to love someone and not stay in, as a lot of times people in the couples therapy world refer to it as like stay in the bunker, stay in this container of safety. And, I think I come from a background in depth psychology, which is really rooted in Jungian psychology. And there's a way that I sort of started to feel that our individuation process and that sort of becoming the self beyond the personality that we've sort of constructed as like a survival strategy a lot of times, but the self that we are beyond that. We're just a society that hasn't really had any sort of prioritization of that as a process, or that that's even something that we should value, like defining ourselves for ourselves and sort of in that individuation process. And what I realized was there were so many ways that I had been really safe and really comfortable in my marital container, but I wasn't continuing to evolve and I wasn't challenging myself to be uncomfortable enough to lean into some of my growing edges. And so as I started realizing that about myself, I realized how much that was true of, I will say, the majority of the couples that I was working with. And a lot of times I think love means I hold on to you and I keep you here because it makes me comfortable, is the understanding that we've had previously. But what I love about what Maya Angelou was saying in that quote is love is not about my comfort necessarily. It's about the way that I define love now, which is loving you means your soul is safe with me. And I want you to do and become and experience all of the things that you came for in this lifetime. And that's what it means for me to love you. I want that for you, even if that means that we have to part ways or that I will be less comfortable than I might be if you were here by my side. But I love you. So I want that for you.
Yeah, when I hear you describe that, and when I read it, because she keeps repeating, I love you,
Mm,
I kept hearing it has nothing to do with you as well. You
mm,
can love me back, you can be dead, you can be alive, you can be someone I can't even be around, but I get to love you. It's the state that lives in me.
I love
And
that.
it's something I've really experienced in my relationships my whole life. I never understood how people stop being friends or stop being partners and just suddenly shut their heart off to somebody.
Mhm.
I think it takes a lot of work to shut your heart off. I think the heart stays on, and that's not a signifier that you're supposed to be with them, but it's this beautiful thing that lives in you that keeps you alive and vital. And so much of your book, much of your philosophy brings me back to that in myself, of that place of, oh, I get to choose how I feel toward you, my love for you. It lives in me. And what you do doesn't touch that. And I even get to have boundaries, even though I fully love you. I get to have preferences. And I want to go into that a bit more with you and your partner and how you transformed that. Yeah, like, explain this to me, because would you say you noticed you were hitting a growth edge because there were ruptures happening, because being together didn't allow you to be more sovereign in yourself? Like, what was the thing that said to you, I'm outgrowing this, or I have to leave this relationship, even though you have all this love?
Yeah, I think there were so many ways that we were sort of butting up against, and actually throughout our entire relationship had always sort of butt up against, like, this is what the quote normal way to be in a relationship is versus the way that I move through the world or maybe felt aligned with the true way of moving for me. Just an example is I'm really introverted, and so I like to spend a lot of time alone, and I don't always, I can be social, but like when it feels like really juicy, meaty conversations, not necessarily like just small talk and that type of thing. And so I was always like, he really loves to be out and with people. And I would be like, amazing, go. Like, I want you to have all of those experiences. It's just not what I want to be doing. And that would be really challenging for him in the beginning of our relationship because he felt like if we're a married couple, we should be there together. We should be, side by side, or people will think there's something wrong with that. Right. And I think there were all of these ways that I was just starting to challenge a lot of the societal blueprints that I'd been fed in general, and that was, something that made him feel uncomfortable or was like, why do we have to challenge it? There's nothing broken here. And it just, I often say now to couples when I'm working them that I think relationships and partnerships when they're thriving need three things, which are respect, inspiration, and a shared vision. And I think throughout different seasons of our relationships, we can have components of that, and all three may not be online. But I think if you go too long and you don't have those three components there, then you start to really feel that. And I think there just was like a real lack of inspiration. I think we certainly had a lot of respect and, safety and, I don't know, maybe the shared vision so much because even that, I think there are still ways that like we co-parent, with a lot of respect for how we're different, but we're very different parents. And so I think, it's interesting. We get along so well as friends because I think we allow for difference, and I
Hmm.
think that people a lot of times don't allow for that difference in their partners in a way that I'm watching and I'm like, "You certainly could." It's just
Hmm.
we're telling ourselves a story a lot of times that you need to be different than you are so that you're a little bit more like me, and what's
Hmm.
interesting about that is a lot of times we're drawn to the yin to our yang. We're sort of attracted to someone who's different because they have sort of our, um less developed function. So
Hmm.
our part of us that we haven't really developed, we see in them and it's attractive in the beginning. But then when we've been together for a while, we start to make that that wrong within them and we want that to change.
Aren't you a Iyanla fan, right?
I love Ayala.
Okay. Remembering
So
that
much.
correctly. So
Yeah.
one of my favorite things from her, she was doing this tour. I didn't get to go to it, but I watched one of the videos. And she was talking to a group of heterosexual women. And she was saying, you know what your problem is? Your problem is you're trying to make your husband your girlfriend. Don't make your husband, let him be your
Oof.
husband. Let him not meet the needs only your girlfriends can meet, and let him meet the needs that they can meet.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much potency in that simple word of advice of, and Esther talks about this a lot, of trying to make your partner be the whole village,
Yes.
right? There's all these diverse people in the village in our society that meet certain needs no one else can meet. I used to call these mosaic friendships. Like each
Mhm.
friendship is a little mosaic piece to the whole of my needs and all these pieces. And I am too. I have to be part of that. But I want to know how you hold that for people and how what you believe in and how you teach people this practice of breaking out of this traditional idea of you must reflect me back to myself, which is very codependent and childlike, actually. Right? Like there's a regressed thing happening there,
Yeah.
as well as you're supposed to meet all my needs. I find in my marriage with Eamon, our relationship has gotten so much better when we both
Mm.
realized, oh, there's some needs you will never, ever meet for me. And that actually makes us more secure now knowing that than trying to make it happen. So allowing for difference, allowing your partner not to meet your needs. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, and I think the thing about the allowing for difference is there's so much about, and I think we have to go back to where it started, and that there was a way that a patriarchal structure sort of put in place this idea of the nuclear family structure, and that this person should be completing all your needs. And as long as you're in this bunker and you're safe, that that's all you should need. But we have these two needs for attachment and some sort of structure, some sort of safety. And that's what I describe as like the masculine in the book, but we also have the need for our feminine, all of us. These are energetics that we all require, and that's my aliveness, um, my autonomy, my individual self. And if we don't have both of those, we will start to feel the ruptures that come up around that. But it's also this idea that when we're that enmeshed and we're that, like, I can't tell where you begin and I end, as we've sort of been societally instructed to, it's why so many of the couples that I work with, I had to start talking about sex because that was the thing that everybody was struggling with. But it becomes
Mhm.
really familial, enmeshed energy. So you're sort of like roommates or brother and sister versus your partner as the erotic other that you have desire for. It's really hard
Mhm.
for me to desire something that I own or that is mine or that, I know that intimately. Like it's funny, we sort of describe like healthy relationships are like a certain level of intimacy. And it's like, well, yes, and some of it is also the unknown aspects of your partner, the curiosity about like where they are and what they're into when they're not with you. Some of that is actually really great for creating that erotic charge between us. Um, but again, I think that there's so many ways that societally we've just been conditioned to believe this person should be everything for you and be able to provide what an entire village of people used to provide for you. And I think there's so much about what I see happening collectively right now where we're sort of having a reckoning with what's been distorted about that. And I think in order to allow for the village, and this is something you and I've talked about, we have to be able to tolerate all of the complexity and the nuance of human
Mhm.
beings. And I think we've really sort of been atrophied in our ability to do that and tolerate that. And if you don't think about this in the exact same way that
Mm.
I do, then you're not my people. And so we become really insular in our experience of who our quote people are, you know?
I love the term atrophied when it comes to that because
Mm,
there's this for me this somatic experience, this felt sense of flexibility when
mhm,
I'm not atrophied in my thinking and when I'm really curious about what does this mean to you? And oh, you're allowed to have an opinion that's completely against even my lifestyle and we can still connect. Like what's it like to connect through difference?
mhm.
Because it's not even on a whole, which is very helpful, for the other and for social media and such to not dehumanize and push people away because of their difference. But it really starts with the personal, my relationship to the parts in me that even contradict. How kind am I with those? And
Mm,
then from there, how that connects to my partner and all their different parts. What comes up in their body? What comes up in their mind when they want something I don't want? How do we kind of connect over those differences? I find that the low capacity for difference comes from the atrophy, which comes from avoiding conflict.
yes.
So many issues I find in relationships, romantic or just platonic friendships, comes from the avoidance of conflict. And conflict to me is like the most fertile initiation of intimacy. It's so deep to look at someone and say, I disagree and risk disappointing them and
Mm,
risk being disappointed and risk being vulnerable and saying, I have this need, and them saying, I can't meet that. All those things that kind of break us apart in conflict, but in that breaking apart kind of uh, tends to a new soil of how we connect. I wanted you to speak a little bit about that because I have so much I want to go into with the masculine and feminine in a moment. But I'm just curious about your personal and especially your clinical or professional experience with conflict avoidance and how that's an intimacy killer
oof.
rather than when someone leans into conflict, how it's really potent and deep.
Yeah, I love everything you just said. You're so brilliant. I love. And I think there's something that is, I think about and this is a lot of what I think we connected on was like my experience growing up
Hmm.
led me to really be curious about where people landed the way, or excuse me, how people landed wherever it
Hmm.
was that they landed, right? So much so that like I would have things that would be incongruent in my head. And I always, like, an example comes to mind that there was a friend of mine whose mother was like, the mom that you like love going to their house. She's so, kind to you and always gives you the best snacks and always is just like, it felt like she adored me, right? And I remember we were at a weekend away doing something and she was like, yeah, it's so weird that my mom is so nice to you because my mom hates Black people. And I was like, in my little like 10-year-old self, like,
Yeah.
like shattered, right? Like,
Yeah.
what does that mean? Like trying to make sense of like, what does that mean? How do I have to feel about her mother now? Am I safe around her mother? All the things, right? And I remember I asked my mom or told my mom about it, and she was like, well, Danae, people a lot of times have stereotypes that they've been fed about Black people. And so what you're doing is you're maybe teaching her that some of those stereotypes aren't true, right?
What a
And
brilliant mother.
I mean, she was. And so, there was a way in that moment I sort of made a connection that people are taught something that they haven't experienced up close. And what I
That's right.
learned is, and I like one of my favorite movies is American History X.
Mm,
And so it's
hmm.
another demonstration of this point, like how racism or otherism is cultivated. And then when we actually get to be up close to people, it becomes really difficult to hate someone when we're actually in conversation or curious about their felt life experience and how they landed wherever they've landed, right? So
Mm,
that's been
hmm.
such a value for me is like seek to understand how this person got wherever they are. And I think I bring that into all of the aspects of the work that I do, whether it's like, couples work and conflict resolution, like, can I be curious instead of making this person wrong for whatever they're experiencing? Can I really seek to understand how they got there, right? If I lead with
Mm,
curiosity, it just changes my experience. And the big thing, and I think this is what has changed everything about my life, and we as a society, I think if we could just lean into this a little bit more, is look for the fear. And when I look for someone's fear, Luis, it just makes everything sort of dissipate in terms of the
mm,
charge. Like when I will be
mhm.
watching someone saying something that I find really challenging or don't agree with, I will look for like, what are they afraid of? What are they
Mhm.
afraid of for their children, for their lifestyle, for like whatever they have found a sense of safety in? And if I can see where they're afraid, then all of a sudden I immediately drop into empathy. And it's really hard for me to hate someone when I see them afraid of something, right? And so, yeah, I think that's like just the relational tool across the board that I see when I'm working with couples all the time. It's like I'm telling myself a story about where this is going to go if I don't get a handle on it and catastrophe. Whereas if we just back up a little bit and try to be curious about why you're defending against this so vehemently, what's the story you're telling yourself about what's going to happen, then all of
Mhm.
a sudden it's a little bit of a de-escalation.
I love this questioning of what are you afraid of because it puts the person in a more vulnerable position. You see
Mhm.
them through a human lens. It's a humanizing practice, isn't it? And that ability to humanize someone that's doing something that really scares us or tenses us up. For me, the somatic experience of that is this softening of
Yeah.
I relate to your humanity because I have fears too, and I have biases drawn from those fears. And it makes me think of the term safe space. In the trauma field, a lot of people really rest on come here, it's a safe space. And what they usually mean when they say safe space is we have a list of words or things you're allowed to do and not do. And so they're saying, we're going to prevent conflict and triggers and such. We're going to kind of
Yes.
homogenize the experience.
Yeah.
And I've never found that as a safe space. It always makes me feel like I'm sitting on pins and needles, like, what am I going to do
Right.
wrong? And I think that's growing up Catholic, going to Catholic church and kind of being like, okay, I have to do everything right or I'm going to be a sinner and I'm going to have to go pray in front of the whole church.
Mm.
But I'm saying this because I've learned in the spaces I create, my team and I actually come out and say things like, we're not creating safe space here. We're not guaranteeing safe space here. You have safety in you, but I can't tell you what the environment is going to be like. And what ends up happening, especially when we have these long retreats, is people notice by day 2 or 3, oh, I feel safe here, not because they're making me, but because everyone here has capacity for difference. So no one's going to be tossed out because they said something controversial.
Oof.
And everyone's responsible for their own triggers. And people can be accountable for what they say or not, but I can still feel my power around what I do with what comes up in my body. And I'm just imagining when these things land into a relationship, between two people, when you know that your other love, your benevolent love, has this ability to really be curious about you and not jump to conclusions and also not try to save you from being triggered by their needs or feelings or opinions. It's an actual safe space because there's a container for a lot of difference and there's a capacity for conflict. I mean, what feels safer than being with someone that has a capacity for conflict? Like, I can't imagine anything else.
Oh my god, I love that so much, and what I started to realize in my relationship, but as I was watching other people so often, is that there was like, this is the space that I feel less safe than anywhere else in the world, and this is the person I'm sleeping next to
Yeah, good
every
point.
night, right? Like, I often call it like intimacy with no intimacy, meaning there are a list of things I know I can't bring up because this
Mm,
person cannot tolerate them and us maintain this attachment. And so there are all of these unspoken things that are going on between us that I can feel the energy of like, you can't say a lot of things, but your partner doesn't necessarily know that.
mm,
And, I love, this is another Iona Van Sant, like sort of framing it this way of like, I don't get to tell people how to love me. I get to decide if I want to participate in the way that they love.
I
And
love that one.
right?
Yes.
And it's just this thing of like our work. And I don't actually think like creating safety in relationships is this thing of molding someone into what makes me a more comfortable version of them. Then
Mm,
we're just sort of in this like contracted state of like, I don't
mhm.
remember what I'm allowed to do. So let me just do very
Right.
little. And that
Oppression sounds
becomes
like oppression, right?
absolutely. And it becomes not sustainable for a lifetime. And then inevitably, at some point, our life force has to erupt out of that. And then we call it maladaptive or that, this person has violated me. And, when people come in to see me, it's normally on the other side of that. And what I
Mm,
really like to frame it as is, of course, this will happen because we were attempting to maintain something that wasn't sustainable, which is not
mm.
showing up authentically as who I am in this dynamic.
Yeah, that's a good way to kind of put it all together because I'm imagining the stress. I mean, I've had this in my relationship in the past. The stress we live in when, in somatic terms, we have a co regulator, so someone's body we feel safe and settled with, and we have
Mm,
a co dysregulator, someone's body we feel stressed with. And when your primary love, when the person, like you said, you sleep next to and share money with and live in a house with and raise kids with, when that person you're with the most is primarily a co dysregulator for you, that is an extremely stressful, overwhelming place to be in. And I think a lot of people emerge from these long term relationships with some relational trauma, even without abuse, because their body's just so overwhelmed from the tension, like you said, the contraction of essentially hiding all these parts, oppressing and repressing all these parts so the partner can feel okay about them. And this is where fawning and sexual fawning comes in. You know, people spending decades just reflexively acquiescing to their partner to not rock the boat. Their partner never learns who they really are because no boundary or need ever emerges. And the partner acquiescing or fawning isn't really having connection or pleasure. They're just performing to secure the connection. And so just to plug my relationship group,
mm,
the whole purpose of this group is to embody the relationship. So it's 6 months of learning how to physically track the sensations that come up in relationship with other people as we explore attachment theory and lens of attachment and sexual fawning and social fawning and codependence and all these things. Because once you have that ability to sit with conflict and rupture and tend to your own charge,
mm,
you don't reflexively make your partner take it away from you, or you don't reflexively try to make them, like Yana said, love me a certain way so I can feel good. You don't use your partner to soothe you essentially anymore.
mm.
You're just literally connecting with someone because you want them, not because you need them. And I'm assuming that's what you discovered, right? In your separation, you discovered probably you were doing those things and you don't want to do those things anymore. And just give me some insight about all that through your own lens.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just like it's making me so happy because, what you said about co-dysregulation to me is the majority of what we are doing and reinforcing relationally.
Mm,
And, I think people often say we're harmed in relationships, and so we heal in relationships, and we need to be in relationship to experience that. And I would say sometimes, but a lot of times, what we're doing is perpetuating those cycles of co-dysregulation that you're
mm,
describing.
mhm,
And I think even when I listen to the conversations and the way I hear a lot of people talking about us inviting more community in and starting to, you know, um, move away from the sort of nuclear family limitations into a more community based model, there's still so much that is about us in the space of co dysregulation and power over dynamics. And I need to be in this codependent relationship with, I need you to see this the way that I see it so that I can
mhm,
feel safe in my skin, where that understanding that I actually have agency over my own sense of safety and how I am processing this, but that really requires that I take responsibility for my narrative and paying attention to my body and paying it to all the tools that you teach so beautifully. But I think we don't have those tools a lot of times. And so it's not our fault. But until we develop those tools,
mhm,
we will sort of attempt to have power over another person, demand compliance a lot of times.
mhm,
And that is where the lack of safety comes from. And so, yeah, I love what you said about it's like a lot of times I ran a singlehood group after my marriage ended because I was like, I just want to like sit and try to understand what all of this was. And it was like people talking about like PTSD of just like experiences of being in relational containers where they were just beat down in terms
mhm,
of the truth of who they were was always wrong. And a lot of times it's a reinforcement of what I experienced in childhood. And I
yep,
sort of choose that dynamic because it feels really familiar. And um, and then if we don't ever sort of accumulate those tools or understand what I was drawing from and why, then we'll continue to be drawn to the same type of relationship over and over again. And in that way, I'm like, actually, I don't think it's a more healthy option for us to be in relationships until we sort of are able to
mhm.
do what you're talking about and the work that you're talking about.
So much I love about that because it's why I love the title and the whole philosophy of yours around sovereign love. It's
Mm,
like that independent, self-governing, self-connected place. When you have that, it's a whole different way to relate to the other. Even like I said, in platonic relationships, your connection to someone is not out of desperation. It's
yes.
the way I've always expressed it or felt it is it's a bonus. It's like I feel so gooey already, and now you're just like the cherry on top. versus
That
it, right? Versus you walk away or we get in an argument. I am nothing until we repair this.
oof.
That's so much you're putting on the other person. And it's this story of having zero agency or power with yourself, without the other person. And I always found couples therapy interesting because I'm gaining from you. I'm assuming that you don't traditionally try to keep people together. If you coming from your own experience,
You
that
would
you're
be
not
correct.
seeking to destroy or keep a relationship together. You're kind of like, let's get into authenticity and then see if the relationship has capacity to foster that in each other.
Yeah.
And I love that. I went through a period of working with couples for a while because people were just referring them to me. And it was the same gig. People would come thinking my job was to keep them together. And I would say, no, my job is to help you be so brutally honest. We can
Yeah.
see if you have capacity to be with this person versus someone you expect them or think they could be. How many people fall in love with the potential of a partner, right? Rather than the partner in front of them. So, all these things I'm just kind of throwing out because your book really details not just the philosophy, but how to start cultivating that in the self. And then from there, showing up to your relationships. So I wanted to just add one more thing or ask you to add one more thing before we go to the masculine feminine, because I love these pieces.
Mm,
Is sovereign love isn't a plea for solitude. It's part of that. But
mm.
what it is really to me is it's a plea for how do I connect to you once I'm in love with myself, once I'm secure in myself. Add anything you want to add to that or clarify.
Yeah, I tend to think of relationships through the lens of like, this is a sacred contract or a
Mm,
sacred assignment. And this person is really showing me to me, like when I feel those activation points coming up, can I see it as information, as something that feels really difficult for me to tolerate and why, right? Versus I need this person to change so that I can exhale and feel safe in my skin, which is so much of what even as I was trained as a couples therapist, right? It's really
mhm.
like how to communicate my needs to effectively get this person to comply with what I would like them to be. Which ultimately, when we think about it, is just so much of what historically people in like individual therapy are talking to me about what their parents did that felt so harmful was here's who I need you to be that is different than your essence in order to be acceptable in this world, and then you will
Mhm,
win my love, right? And so we
mhm,
sort of continue that in adulthood, whereas I used to talk about, and even in the book, and when I talk about interdependence, I talk about it a little bit differently than a lot of people because I don't sort of speak to it from a scarcity model in that, like, we need other people for survival. That's not actually my belief. I think, and this comes from, I used to work in addiction recovery. And I think
mhm,
that anything that I need for survival, I start
mhm.
to develop sort of a maladaptive relationship with. And what happens when that thing is taken away? I have a panic that happens inside of
Yep.
me, right? And so that never sat well with me that like we need to have a certain level of dependence on our partner. What I've started to think of it is as that we are like constellations of sovereignty and that we are meant to have people in our life experience that we collide with, that we learn from, and that we have, we dance with in the
Mhm,
experience of our humanity, but that we're not actually meant to believe that our ego mind knows who this person is supposed to be in my life for how long and in what iteration. Like it could be a lifetime, it could be like a couple months, but we don't know. But can I be open to being as present and as honest as possible and really seeing whatever comes up in our relationship dynamic as information for me, right? To do
mhm,
some of that integrative work for myself versus feeling like I just need to make someone else change in order to feel safety in my skin. Because no matter what, that's always going to be an outsourcing of our power that I actually believe our soul is not in agreement with in terms of like a larger truth.
mm. Yeah, I just feel that last sentence. I've been really feeling into self lately
Mm,
because I've heard of it, talk about it, think about it. It's always what we're working with: self-regulation, self-connection, self-love. but I was actually asked by my members, I have this private membership community, and the members in the community were saying, a few of them said, what does self feel like? I was like, ooh.
Mm,
So I was kind of feeling into that. And it's really the way you just said it, I felt it. Uh, it's this place that literally it can't be touched.
mm,
It's so vast and it's so connected to everything that it doesn't tense up. It doesn't fear people. It doesn't have a weird story. It's so unbothered by everything else that bothers me. And when I really touch into that, I'm so connected to everything that
mm,
even the idea of needing someone besides a reality of, we need each other to do, very physical things in the world, like make food and grow food and build houses and things. But needing someone to meet all my needs is it's almost like a silly joke. It's like I start to laugh because because this idea of this whole universe is here to support me, and there's this one person who can't in this moment, and that's all I'm focusing on. Like, it's so silly.
But that part is important because I think that's a lot of times like the misunderstanding of what we're saying. Like, I'm not saying we don't need people, but what I'm
Yeah,
saying is I do not need this particular person to show up
that's where
in
it
this
is.
particular way because life will always support me in colliding with the people that are meant to sort of be in the dance with me. But I don't have to be in control of anyone to make that happen.
Yes, that's such a good clarifying point for people because people get really pissed when you talk about, right? It's very
Yes, they do.
controversial when you when you start calling out these relational patterns, these codependents. They say, "Well, what do you mean? Of course, we're dependent on each other." But what you just said, I'm not dependent on this person for this need. That's really what we want to underline, the this
Mm,
person. And I've seen, I've done a lot of work in addiction recovery, and the most successful people I have seen in terms of actually recover, not just pure abstinence, but not even an interest
mhm.
in the substance, are the people that expanded other people, places, things that meet their needs. Because the heroin, for example, met a need of comfort that no one could touch. So
Yes.
it all went there. But then when they started looking around, they're like, oh, laying in the sun, dancing, eating this really good food, listening to music, asking for hugs instead of going into
Mm,
the room alone, these simple little shifts. They
yeah.
noticed there's 4,000 places I can choose from to feel comfort. I don't even care about this one that I thought was the only one. So, absolutely, to your point, I just wanted to add that. I really want to dive into the masculine and feminine because it's a
Mhm.
big part of your work. It's a big part of your book. And it is so important to me. As an
Mhm.
intersex person, I was thrown into the biological experience of masculine and feminine
Mhm.
because there's so many places to go here. There's the biology of masculine and feminine, there's the spirit of masculine and feminine,
Yeah.
and then there's gender. And
Mhm.
I clarify this a lot for people in the modern age that get a lot of these things conflated. Gender is literal expression. It's not tied to anything biological.
Yeah.
And then there's biological sex, which is very, very physical and real. And then there's masculine and feminine energies.
Mhm.
And when your sex hormones amplify your masculine and feminine energy, essentially.
Mm.
But a person's biological sex, it doesn't, they're not limited to masculine or feminine, right? I say all that to open up your work because this is, I think, one of the most important conversations that we're not having in relationships around charge, around polarity, around attraction, balance, all these pieces. There's this push to be non binary in sometimes gender expression, even in thought. And there's for me, a reality of binary charge being amazing, when you know how to invoke it. So, like when we think of the masculine and feminine, let's look at a gay relationship, two men. The
Mhm.
most successful gay male relationships I've ever experienced are the ones that have a really strong masculine and a really strong feminine.
Yeah.
And sometimes they even play back and forth, but they
Mhm.
know to invoke these, they have this amazing sexual charge. Same thing, I mean, really, same thing with straight people and lesbians. But I'm just kind of throwing this out so people can expand their idea of what we're talking about with sexuality and masculinity and femininity.
Yeah.
Where do we begin?
Oh, yeah. And, I feel like when I started to witness these dynamics and these energetics playing out in couples, that was like the question. I was like, nobody's talking about this, and yet it is such a pronounced fact as I'm watching it of like, this is something we have to figure out how to talk about with the nuance that it requires. And it feels complex to talk about because it isn't binary. It isn't sort of a linear framework of how any of these energetics are alive. The way that we're socialized around gender lives in us and in our tissues. And it's this thing of like, I was trying to dance around how to talk about it without really offending anyone. And I was like, well,
Good
I'm
luck.
going to. So let's just
Luck
get in
with
there
that
anyway
one.
and
That's right.
give one another some grace around there are ways that like what I'm going to say is going to touch upon a pain point for someone always, because
Hmm.
that's our lives.
Yeah.
And we can't be in right relationship with what we can't talk about, right? And so
Hmm.
to the point that you're so beautifully expressing, I think understanding the difference between the way that we are socialized around gender and what comes up biologically that sometimes are some of the facts that we can't argue regardless. I've just watched some of the ways these play out with like having a son and like watching like some of the
Oh yeah.
biological differences between him and like the little girl. So it's like you kind of can't argue that that's like what I'm watching happen. But then also the polarities and what creates like an erotic charge in terms of polarity and some of the draw towards one another. Or, it's funny when we were in New York once, Eamon was like, well, you can't argue with magnets. Like there are some things that like polarity is going to draw us to one another or not, right? And so it's like we can argue that these things, quote, shouldn't be, but they are. And so
Mm,
I think what becomes important is just to be able to name that it's complex and it's nuanced. And to me, that is the realm of the feminine, which we all have that energetic within us, but we've really been conditioned to reject or feel like it's unsafe. It's sort of
mhm,
that dark, hollowed, unnameable, untamable space
mhm,
within within our lives and within ourselves. But I believe that that's why we've got to be able to like, yeah, let's play with it. Let's get in there and
mhm,
explore it. And we can't do it wrong. And I think when we decide, as you were describing before with some of the group work, when we decide that we can't get it wrong and we're just gonna give one another grace for whatever comes up, then it becomes so unbelievably healing to experience one another in our experience of this. And I'll give an example. I was just teaching at a workshop a few weeks ago, and white cis hetero man came up to me before or in the break before we started getting into the masculine and feminine energetics, and he was like, I'm so nervous, Danae. And I almost was going to leave and not come back, but I wanted to tell you ahead of time that I feel like I'm going to say the wrong thing and someone's going to call me toxic. And so I don't know, like I might not talk. And I was like, well, I'm going to ask you so sincerely to speak, brother, because I think if we don't sort of create a tolerance within ourselves for allowing people to say these things imperfectly, myself included, and I will say this imperfectly, then we can't talk about what is
nope.
really problematic about all of the ways that we're not allowed to talk about this stuff, but it's very much alive. I mean, look at the way that people are talking about gender in our cultural zeitgeist right now that is just like
Mhm.
such like at war with one
Yep.
another around all of this, right? So I love to talk about
Mm. Well, when you were saying about we have to talk about it imperfectly, I'm thinking that's what relationships are,
it.
right? Like a contract, a bureaucracy, a product, that's like a perfect thing that's predictable and not human. But a relationship is supposed to be imperfect, it's supposed to be messy, it's supposed to be offensive. All these things are part of it. And I think there's so much coming up. One thing I love about you, you write this in your book, you say this just naturally, the way even you just started to say it. There's such a concept that when you look at masculinity, there's this kind of instantaneous overcoupling with the word toxic. It's
Mm.
almost as if masculinity in itself is a problem. And there's this I mean, to me, we're in this really interesting cultural moment where collectively we're seeing the first generation of young boys who kind of grew up thinking that it's bad to be male. You're seeing how they talk about themselves, how confused they are. They don't know who to look to. Some of them look to figures that are actually violent. And I think it's fascinating to see what happens when we've had plenty of historical experience of what it's like to put down the feminine and
Mm.
to pendulate now to put down the masculine as if it's some kind of reconciliation, to me is just a repetition of patriarchy in and on itself, and women being even at times toxic masculine in putting down men or putting down men's ability to support them. And again, like I said, vice versa. But we're kind of in this interesting part culturally. We're at the beginning of, okay, let's start damning the men,
Mm,
and or the masculine in general. But it's so, to me, the feminine and masculine are such gorgeous creatures, and they're
mhm.
ancient, and they're
Yes.
beyond human. To me, they're planetary, they're sun and moon, they're tree, they're plant, they're flower. Like, it's everywhere because it's an energetic expression. It's not even a human social, it's not a social construct at all. Gender might be, but masculine and feminine are these real directions of energy, like you were saying, with the magnets and such. So I'm just saying all this because I think I know in my own body, I hated the masculine, hated it.
Mm,
And it took me until probably 2 years after we had our daughter, and she's 10 and a half now. That's when I started saying maybe the masculine isn't bad,
mm,
because my fathering started to come up in this way. Like, that father energy started to emerge and awaken. And it
mm,
was so powerful. It was like really boundaried. And it was kind of, it was what I would have considered harsh before, but it was a container.
mm,
And the way that container supports my wife and my daughter and my friends and the work I do, even, it's like I bring this masculine container from a very historically feminine experience that I used to have in my body. And I'm saying it because it's been this reclamation of how the masculine
mm,
is so important and beautiful and nurturing and connective, and how it even supports a deeper feminine. Like, together, they actually deepen in their ability to support and nurture. But I
mm.
want your words. This is a lot of your theory. What do you? How do you teach people this? What are your beliefs around this? Let's go a little deeper while we can.
Yeah, I there's something you said that I think is important in terms of the way that we've been holding masculinity, and I would say this is even a little bit more historic, or it's been going on longer than we're aware of. And something that I didn't think of until I had a son who is now 8 myself was the experience. Like, I often say now that I think we're a society where men are taught not to fully feel and women are taught not to care that men don't feel. And I say that because there's so many ways. I was never curious about the experience of men or
Mm,
masculinity until I had a son. But in retrospect, what I remember about the dinner table, and this is the case so often I've found, is that my mother and women, in attempt to teach us to be strong feminists and that we could do all of these things for ourselves, sat at the dinner table talking about how toxic and awful men and masculinity were, while my brother was sitting there sort
mm,
of attempting
mhm,
to metabolize, what does that mean about me as a man? Who am I supposed to be to not be that, right? And I think so much of what we're experiencing in this moment collectively is the response to a few generations now of young men being taught, like, the essence of who I am and my masculinity is wrong, and I'm supposed to reject that to be a good man. And I
mhm,
think that wasn't a sustainable strategy. And so there was a point when, to reclaim, I'm tired of apologizing for myself, the pendulum has swung so far into something that, like, might be what we're considering maladaptive, but it's sort of a,
mhm,
like, of course this is the response. And it's so funny, and I've heard you speak to this a little bit in terms of, like, long form podcasts, but there was a few months ago, I don't remember exactly, but Mark Zuckerberg was talking about masculine and feminine energetics. So, because this
mhm.
is the love affair that I have and the obsession, all the people were sending me, "Did you see what Mark Zuckerberg said?" Right? And they were like, "He is ridiculous. He's gone rogue. He's crazy." Right? And I was like, "Well, let me listen to what he's saying." Right? So I sat and listened to him on Joe Rogan's podcast. And I was like, I actually agree with like 90% of what he's saying.
Mm,
Now, I think he might not have the language to articulate what he is saying in a way that isn't sort of evoking a visceral response in people, because we're just so reactionary and
yeah,
offended,
yeah,
right?
that's right.
But what was saying was, men have not had any, what you're saying, not had any sort of modeling of how to be in healthy masculine warrior energy that is very much a part of what healthy masculinity is, that men, when they are an integrated self, are meant to embody some of that, right? So he was talking about himself in I don't know if it was jujitsu or what, but that like this is all of the reclamation of his masculine. And he
Mm,
was talking about it in a really beautiful way.
mm,
So I'm saying all of this to say what I think we're living through right now is the reckoning with what has been sort of an emphasis on wounded masculine energy. We
mhm,
haven't had a
mhm.
lot of models of what healthy masculine energy in men, women, however we're talking about gender, but like we all have these energetics within us, but we've sort of been dancing between the distorted or wounded representation of these energetics.
Yeah, I like that term wounded masculine and wounded feminine. I did
Mhm.
this 50 woman group at one point around the feminine. And it was amazing because I expected them to feel so empowered and love their feminine because it's kind of like the messaging of the last maybe 2 decades or so. It was total opposite. There was so much wounding in the lineage and wounding in the feminine, like feeling betrayed by girlfriends growing up and
Yeah.
their mother being really manipulative with them or like overpowering them with their hurt or overwhelming them rather with her needs and them needing to mother her. And all these women were saying, I've actually hated my feminine. I've hated being a
Mhm.
woman. And so how interesting because we love these narratives that like men have it better or women have it better. But it's kind of like in this parallel right now of wounded masculine, wounded feminine, trying to find this way, right? I think I said woman, wounded masculine, wounded feminine, trying to find this way to each other. But when you hate the thing that creates polarity and creates balance and creates
Mm,
structures, then you lack all container. And then it seems like when you come with another person, there's a lot of confusion. You expect them to be the masculine you can't be, or the feminine you can't be. And again, part of this sovereign love for me, and I really felt this as an intersex person because I've had both biological experiences to a certain extent. When you have that masculine and feminine within you, it's an incredible experience.
mm.
I'm not looking for a woman to fulfill my feminine or a man to fulfill my masculine. It's like it's in me. And now I get to connect to the other person and from there play with those energies. Is that essentially your experience too?
I'm smiling so much because I feel like in your felt experience, you have had what I attempt to articulate is what I think is the way forward in the book, which is all of us learning how to integrate our inner masculine and feminine so that we're not looking to outsource that
Mm,
from someone else, so that we can just be present and in relationship with this other person without believing that our underdeveloped function. That we're experiencing through them is something that either we need to be at war with or
mhm,
that we need to like outsource and extract energy from, right? So I mean, you said it so beautifully. Like that to me is the point. We are coming into a space of sovereignty where we know how to do all of these things for ourselves. And because I've met myself there, I don't actually need anything from you to love you. I
mm.
can just be here.
And I'll just say, because we have to close, I've done masculine and feminine, embodiment, polarity work with straight men, with gay men, with transsexuals, with women. It is
Mm,
amazing how incredibly integrated a person becomes when they learn how to play with those energies. And with straight men in particular, it's really wonderful to see them invoke the feminine and how that
mhm.
deepens their security and their masculine even more. Like it's incredible how much more secure they become as a man when they invoke the feminine, which you wouldn't necessarily think. So gosh, Janae, I'm slightly unsatisfied because there's so much I want to talk to you about. I'm
Oh.
satisfied to be with you and everything that was said, but there's so much more. So we'll have to shelve it, for another time. I do want to point people to the book Sovereign Love, which they can order. We'll have the link in the episode details. And we'll also put a link in the episode details to your upcoming retreat at Kripalu. I just did one. And are you returning? Is this your first one there?
I'm returning. Yeah, it's my
Okay.
second time.
It's lovely there, isn't it? They really take care
I'm
of everything.
and it's gonna be in the fall, so I'm really excited because
Yeah.
last time it was so cold when I was there, so I'm excited to go in the fall with all the
Do you have the
trees and
dates
all
here?
that. It is the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th? 3rd
Excellent.
through the 5th. Sorry, 3rd through the 5th of October.
Great. So, and this is open for couples, singles, anybody?
Everyone. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Excellent. So if you're on the East Coast, check it out. Also, we'll link that in the episode details. And we'll have a link for my 6-month embodied relationship group. So ideally do all three. Get the book,
Mhm.
go see Danae, have her sign it, and then join me in the relationship group. That's how you can get all this goodness. Um, thank you, love, for being my friend
Mhm.
and being my colleague and doing what you do in the world and being a really, I'm saying this to you off camera, but I wouldn't say it to you on camera. I have this inner circle,
Mm.
and there's different people that move through it, like you were saying with planets earlier, and this being this kind of like feeling of constellations. But I reserve my inner circle for people that I know anything goes,
Mm.
that they have capacity literally to hear anything, and I'll be met with curiosity, never with judgment.
Yeah.
And I'm just so grateful to have you in that. It's a privilege.
Oh, Louise, just your existence has been, I'm gonna cry, such a healing force in my life. And I just admire and am so grateful for all that you are. And always, 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 my soul feels like it's had such nourishment being in your presence. So thank you for who you are and the way that you are showing up for this life. You are such a gift, truly.
Thank you, sweetie. I have to hop off for real. I can't pretend to say goodbye and then talk afterwards.
Aw, I love you.
I
Thank
love
you
you
for
too.
having me. I'm so honored.
And I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Thank you for watching today's episode. Please like and subscribe if you found it useful, and let me know in the comments what you want me to cover next. I have developed a 4-week self-paced course that takes 18 years of my personal and professional experience and puts it into one place where you can easily and quickly learn the foundations of recovering from stress and trauma. How does the food you eat affect your stress levels? How do the relationships in your life create stress or peace? How does the relationship you have with your body allow you to feel happier and more settled? I will cover all this and so much more in this 4-week self-paced course. And the best part, it's self-paced. You don't have to sign up at a certain date or finish it at a certain time. It's yours for life, and it's waiting there for you when you're ready to finish it. Throughout this course, I'll be teaching you philosophies and practices that combine my 3 favorite modalities: somatic experiencing, embodied parts work, and nutrition. For more information on this course, click on the link in my episode details. For wildlife, native plants, and people who are lucky enough to retreat there. Picture a vibrant jungle canopy atop a hill with a saltwater infinity pool, yoga classes, next-level local cuisine, and beautiful views of the land and sea. Not to mention the very special, magical experience of wading in the saltwater pool while a crew of little baby monkeys rest on the branches above you. Your room is situated just minutes from the most beautiful ocean I've ever met, with tide pools featuring everything from blue octopus to starfish and a rainbow variety of tropical fish. And yes, I will be personally introducing you to each and every one of them. So let's go into the retreat itself. I'll be joined by my dear friends Zach and Camille as we teach you the art of finding safety in yourself, especially as it relates to fawning and people-pleasing and eating habits, which are all very connected. I'm going to teach you how to eat to recover from stress and trauma, how to use food cravings as a compass for unmet needs, how to tend to your capacity for being seen and being uncomfortable so you can stop fawning so much, and how to embody and ground big emotions and sensations that arise in your body. It's an easy flight to the airport, and Blue Spirit will manage your transportation from there. Visit holisticlifenavigation.com and click on events for more information, or click on the link in the episode details. We will be waiting for you on the other side in glorious, warm, vibrant Costa Rica.